the world didn't blink. That's the most dangerous part. A president was captured, a country was taken, and markets, they went up, oil barely moved, stocks rallied, gold whispered danger. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Not about democracy, not about elections. 3 words: total access. Total access to oil, total access to infrastructure, total access to a nation's future. This wasn't a war speech. It sounded like a board meeting. And that's the signal you should not ignore. Because when power speaks in corporate language, history accelerates quietly, relentlessly. If this feels bigger than Venezuela, trust that instinct. You're right. Stay with me. Follow this channel if you want analysis that cuts through the noise, not adds to it. Because what just happened is not an exception. It's a prototype. And to understand where this is going, we need to slow the moment down and look at the system underneath it. Let's strip this down to its core. What is actually happening here? This is not just about removing a leader. It's about redefining control. The stated goal is stability, security, stopping drug flows, rebuilding a broken country. But the operational focus tells a different story. Energy infrastructure, oil supply, certainty. Venezuela holds the world's largest proven oil reserves, yet it produces a fraction of global supply. Years of sanctions, years of collapse, years of decay. Into that vacuum steps power, not with annexation, not with elections, but with access. Whoever governs next is expected to align with US policy goals. Not necessarily with popular legitimacy, not necessarily with democratic transition. And that distinction matters because it changes the question from who rules to who decides what matters. This is why markets stayed calm. They weren't pricing chaos. They were pricing control. To see how we arrived at this moment, we need to go backward into the cycle that made this outcome almost inevitable. To understand this moment, you have to understand the cycle. Venezuela didn't collapse overnight. It eroded. Years of mismanagement, years of sanctions, years of an oil industry slowly breaking apart. Production fell, revenue dried up, infrastructure aged, skilled workers left. The country still sat on enormous reserves, the largest proven reserves in the world. But reserves don't move markets. Production does. At the same time, the global oil system changed. Oversupply, OPEC plus pauses. Lower prices, tighter margins, that combination matters because it turns oil from a blessing into leverage. Sanctions restricted Venezuela's ability to sell. Embargoes limited investment. Output kept falling, and slowly a paradox formed. A country rich in oil, too broken to use it, too strategic to ignore. When systems reach that point, intervention stops being ideological. It becomes transactional. This is where history usually pivots, not with tanks first, but with contracts, access, and guarantees. And once that door opens, events start accelerating. Because cycles don't end quietly. They break, then the cycle snapped. Not gradually, not diplomatically. Suddenly, one moment, Venezuela was a long-term problem. The next, its president was gone, captured, removed from the board, and instantly the language changed. No talk of timelines, no talk of elections, just urgency. We need total access. That phrase landed like a shockwave because it reframed the crisis. This was no longer about who failed. It was about what could be taken over. Oil infrastructure, energy flows, rebuilding through control. Markets reacted before people did. Oil swung, then settled. Equities climbed, gold spiked quietly. This is how modern crises reveal their meaning. Not through panic, but through pricing. If you're still with me, pause for a second. This is where most analysis stops. At the headline, stay subscribed if you want to go further into what this moment is really exposing. Because the real story isn't the capture, it's what came after. And what came after tells us how power actually works now. Here's the part most people miss. Power today doesn't need occupation. It needs architecture. Control the system, you control the outcome. In Venezuela, the mechanism is simple. Oil is the spine of the economy. Refineries, pipelines, ports, financing, whoever controls that spine controls the state. The US doesn't need troops everywhere. It needs alignment, policy compliance, energy access. That's why the focus isn't elections first, it's infrastructure first. Rebuild the oil system, stabilize supply, create certainty for markets. Then politics follows. This is also why sanctions matter. They don't just punish, they weaken systems until access becomes negotiable. And once access is granted, leverage locks in. This is not unique to Venezuela. It's a model, a country in crisis, a strategic resource, a promise of rebuilding, conditional control. It looks technocratic. It sounds reasonable, but it quietly rewrites sovereignty. And when one case works, others start watching. Which brings us to the next shock. Because Venezuela is not the only signal being sent. The second shock didn't come from Latin America. It came from the Arctic, Greenland, a place most people see as ice. Power sees it as position, national security, shipping lanes, natural resources, Russian ships, Chinese presence. The message was blunt. We need Greenland. Not because it's failing, not because it's chaotic, but because it's strategic. This is where the pattern becomes undeniable. Venezuela shows what happens when a state collapses. Greenland shows what happens even when it doesn't. Different cases, same logic. Control doesn't require crisis anymore. Only justification. Markets didn't panic here either, because this isn't about immediate disruption. It's about future leverage. And other powers are paying attention. Moscow, Beijing, Pyongyang. If one power redraws boundaries through access and security, others will test how far they can go. This is how spheres of influence return. Not declared, implied, quiet enough to avoid war, loud enough to change behavior. And while leaders talk strategy, there's a group that always absorbs the impact first. Ordinary people. That's where we need to look next. This is where it stops being abstract. This is where it reaches you. Because systems don't fall on leaders first. They fall on people. If you live in Venezuela, this isn't a chess move. It's your electricity, your job, your future. Years of collapse already hollowed daily life. Now add uncertainty. Who is really in charge? Who decides prices? Who controls wages? Rebuilding sounds hopeful, but rebuilding under conditional control feels different because every decision is filtered through someone else's priorities. And even if you don't live there, don't look away, because this logic travels. Energy prices affect your bills. Market confidence affects your savings. Geopolitics decides where growth goes and where it doesn't. You're told this is about stability. But stability for whom? If this kind of analysis helps you see the world more clearly, share it. Subscribe. Stay with me. Because once people realize they are variables inside a system, they start asking better questions. And the next question is global. What happens when this logic scales? Once this logic goes global, nothing stays local. Venezuela sends a message, not in words, in precedent. If energy access justifies intervention, every resource-rich region recalculates risk. China watches closely, not because it plans to act tomorrow, but because signals shape timing. Russia watches differently. Troops already on the ground, territory already contested. The lesson isn't permission, it's patience. Even smaller powers take notes. If great powers trade restraint for alignment, then neutrality loses value. Markets reflect this shift faster than politics. Capital moves towards certainty, away from ambiguity. Supply chains reroute, alliances harden. This is how a new order forms. Not with treaties, with expectations. You don't announce spheres of influence anymore. You demonstrate them, and once demonstrated, they don't need enforcement every time. The system self-corrects, but no system is permanent. Every order creates pressure. Every pressure seeks release, which leaves us staring at the future. Not one outcome, but several, and none of them are passive. From here, the future splits, not into chaos or calm, but into paths. Scenario 1, order holds. Investment flows in, oil infrastructure is rebuilt slowly. Production rises over years, not months. Markets gain confidence. Control stabilizes the system. Venezuela becomes functional, not fully sovereign, but predictable, and in this world, predictability is power. Scenario 2, the middle path. Rebuilding begins, but politics lag behind. Legitimacy stays fragile. Factions compete. Violence flickers at the edges. Oil returns, but unevenly. Markets hesitate. Investors demand guarantees. The system works, but only under constant pressure. Scenario 3, the fracture. Control without consent fails. Institutions resist. Uncertainty spreads. Capital pulls back. Oil stays underground. Debt remains unresolved. Instability spills outward into markets, migration, and security. History tells us this much. Systems built on access alone are efficient, but brittle. They function until they don't. And that leaves us with one final question. Not about Venezuela, not about Greenland, but about what kind of world you are being prepared to live in. So let's end where all real analysis should, with insight. This is not a return to the past. It's an update. Empires once ruled through flags and force. This one rules through access, systems, and leverage. No declarations, no occupations, just control points, oil fields, shipping lanes, financial plumbing, and the world adapts. Markets normalize it, institutions rationalize it. People feel it last. Here's the danger. When power becomes transactional, values become optional, and when sovereignty is measured by usefulness, every nation becomes conditional. This is why Venezuela matters. Not for its oil alone, but for what it reveals. You are entering a world where stability is offered, not guaranteed, where order is managed, not shared. If you want to understand this world before it explains itself to you the hard way, stay with this channel. Share this analysis. Watch what happens next. Because this story doesn't end here. It moves north, it moves east, and it's already looking for its next test case.